Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you're listening to Get In. This is the opportunity to get into conversations, and I have a really great, interesting guest today that you're going to love. It's all about being satiated. Don't go away. I'm the founder of NIA, an international company that's been changing people's bodies and lives since 1983 through a movement. I'm not just talking about body movement, I'm talking about movement of the mind, the emotions, and spirit. I'm talking about how to metabolize and digest life in a body in the best way. Our topic today, as I said, is sustenance, satiation, not just for self, but thinking outside of the box, thinking, me, what about we? What about us? Community. That's where it's all about community connection. And, if you have suffered, like many people from COVID, the lack of connection, you know what happens when you're not connected, when you don't have resources to feel good. I'm not just talking about food, but I'm talking about human connection, community interaction. My guest today is Lianna Reisner. Now, this is a mover and a shaker, right? She lives in one of my favorite places on the planet, New York City. She is dedicated to that empowerment I talked about, bringing communities together to do what? Well, just like Nia, dedicated to helping people reclaim their health and their well-being through movement. She does it in a very unique way. Think about what you put in your mouth. She does it out of heart. She's backed by science. It's not just some whimsical idea. She believes that we can heal ourselves and also our fragile planet. Well, she certainly got me right there. I think about it all the time. She has a company called Plant Powered, Plant Powered Metro New York. Plant Powered. Don't you love the idea of New York being powered on plants? And I'm not talking marijuana, I'm talking about all kinds of plants. We're talking about education, body and life education, and leadership that empowers people, individuals, to come together to not only find better health for themselves and to overcome chronic disease through whole food, plant based nutrition, but to work together to build strong communities, to take an idea and let it reach out beyond that one person who had the idea, which was Liana. As I said, what she's going to share with us, it's not hype. It's a business backed by science with evidence based education resources designed to support and create community, inspire change through the New York metropolitan area, and even create change in city government. Don't you love it? Imagine just for a moment, close your eyes and imagine if this isolated New York metropolitan area vision expanded globally. I can see it. Can you imagine the shift in health and well being? I can. And that's what we're about to talk about. Liana, well, she's president of the network, director of Plant Powered Metro New York. She founded this organization in 2019. So think back then, 2019, what was going on with food? She has built a multicultural movement. Now, here's the key word: healthcare. Self care and healthcare related to what we put in our mouth. So very important. Everything affects our health and well being: our food, our movement, our emotions, everything. Her vision has empowered people Now, local residents and communities to build health resilience and connection with each other through whole food, plant based nutrition. Now, don't think for a moment I'm telling you you can't have meat. That's not what we're saying. We're talking about a way to balance and to have a better diet, create a better planet. She holds a master's degree from Case Western Reserve University in positive, I love it, positive organization development and change. That's what we're in right now, people. Change. Whether you like it or not, the universe is moving, expanding, and accelerating at a speed I, for one, sometimes find it hard to keep up. But change, that's how we evolve. And when we talk about change, whether it's change in our movement, change in a lifestyle, it includes food. Lianna lives with her husband and 3 children, as I said, in Manhattan, in my favorite place. It is that place where movers and shakers live. Welcome, welcome, Lianna. This is such a joy. I'm so happy that Caroline Coles recommended I chat with you. I know that I, like everybody else, would like to know about you. You're a mother, a wife, a leader, classically trained vocalist. You support organization teams. You call them positive change agents. You have an organization. Tell us about you.
Thanks for that beautiful introduction, Debbie. It's such an honor to be here and to speak with all of your listeners. I am drawn to the idea that we can each be change agents, each and us every day in our lives, no matter where we are at so many different levels. So for me, I didn't know that I would be doing what I'm doing now when I was a youngster. I sort of fell into the movement that I am in now because as a mother, I wanted to know how to feed my kids to be healthy. And I was also, as I was aging in my 20s, trying to figure out what should I eat to be healthy. And if you know anything about nutrition, it's that there are 1,000 different theories of what we should be eating. And I think it's so hard for each of us to be able to cut through the noise and understand, well, is there a good way? Is there a single way? Is there perhaps a few great ways that we could eat to be healthy? And so I went on that journey to explore as a mother and as somebody struggling with my own health, and was pleasantly surprised that there was more evidence out there than I had ever imagined that eating plants, eating whole plant foods could really fuel our health in the most magical ways. And what early on I found out that when I ate a mostly unprocessed diet of plants, the symptoms of endometriosis, which I had lived with for 15 or more years, really just fizzled away. And for so many women among us who might be listening who have dealt with heavy and painful periods, and you know how that affects your daily life,
Yeah.
that was my experience. And it was really remarkable to just notice how swiftly food could reduce my my monthly experience of my body to be something that really felt quite liberating. So it was in that liberation that I said, whoa, what's going on here? Who can I be to learn more about this field, about this movement, to be able to feel comfortable with what I had experienced on a scientific level, but also on a lifestyle level. So I deepened my own practice, learning more about how to eat to be healthy, and then immediately had to share it with the world and needed a way to do that that would be in that framework of positivity, because we all feel so judged when we are told what to eat, or we're told that something that we love or something that we've been doing may be damaging to our bodies. And so finding ways to open that conversation with others was really at the top of my mind when I came out of this experience of personal liberation from my health woes.
Well, I'm a lot older than you. And I remember when I was pregnant that the only discussion about food was, were you going to breastfeed or not breastfeed?
Hmm.
That was
Yeah.
it in terms of nutrition. And, oh, God, my poor children, thank God they're healthy and well. I was into the little Gerber baby, jars, and I can remember my dad one time saying to me, "Aren't you gonna cook real food?" I went, "No, this is nutritious." I never questioned. And, as a child, I was plagued, with every kind of, um illness that affects the senses, from nose, throat, eyes, ear infections, all of that. Nobody ever thought that maybe it was what I was putting in my mouth. Now, I have to say, I was lucky that my mother was from London. I never had a canned product until I was 19 years old. Plus, I grew up behind a farm. So every night, Debbie would climb the hill to go get fresh vegetables. So I was really lucky that I was given really great food. Eventually, as they discovered that I was allergic to milk products, then the eczema and everything else went away. But it was taking the time to figure out what am I putting in that is causing this reaction in this beautiful, beautiful biosphere body that is so delicate, right? Um,
Exactly.
when you started doing your research and you started learning about this new information, was there one piece of information where you went, oh my gosh? Was it a statistic?
It was really just the basic idea that plants are the fuel of the human body. I had never stopped to think about that because, we both grew up, as many people do, where we have the given of having dairy products, the given of eating eggs, the given of having chicken. And it's just all part of this invisible system that we don't recognize until we start to step out of it. So for me, it was more so on the plant side of things, because if you talk to any researcher across the world about what's the problem with our food system, they will all say processed foods.
Mm.
And so we know, right? Unfortunately, this is our food system is flooded with products that are shelf stable, that have so many additives, that have fractions of the foods that have been so heavily processed. We know that those foods are inflammatory and problematic,
Yeah.
but we have a harder time as a species stopping and saying, wait a minute, is it really reasonable to be eating animal foods? So I think that was the biggest moment for me, also because when I went on my journey to do my research, I had many stops along the way. And being where I am in Manhattan, there's thousands of people around me doing crazy things with their diet. So,
Mhm.
I had people who were trying out more, low carb, high fat diets. I had people around me who were restricting gluten because they thought it made them feel better. I had all these different things, and I didn't really know what was real and what was something that people wanted to do because they were trying to latch on to anything. So what really drew me in even further to the field of plant-based nutrition was just how much evidence was behind it. I was getting the message from functional medicine doctors that, you should be eating meat for the healthy fats that you need in your diet. But once you dig further and further, you come to realize, oh, well, the healthiest fats are found in plant foods. And your body creates fats also so that it can have healthy cells. And so there are so many aspects of nutrition and nutrition science that I think we know, we construct our reality. And I'm in the space of reconstruction where I want to change my mindset and help others come to change it as well, but not feel like there's guilt and shame in that process. It's just that, our society has gone in a direction that makes it harder for us to even recognize these challenges.
Well, and I also think that quite often, without the understanding or knowledge and education, people don't realize that all the necessary protein, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals that we need to sustain our optimal health, we can get from a plant based diet. and they don't teach us that. Now, in NEA we have this thing called the body's way. And so we look at the design and the function of the human body, and we say, okay, if it's designed for that, and if it's designed to function like that, how about if I respect that and start following that design and function? Will I feel better? Um, and then there's your body's way, which I believe is very important for people to discern what's unique to my body. Now, that means looking at your lifestyle. Are you very athletic, more athletic than somebody else? Do you exercise or not? How much time do you sit? All kinds of things. Because looking at food as a source of fuel and a source of energy, we have to understand how we're utilizing that energy. But you bring up a really good awareness that I don't think a lot of people pay enough attention to, and that's inflammation. And, I notice it immediately if I go out to eat and there's any kind of additive or MSG in the food. Immediately, my hands swell. Now, maybe not perceptible to somebody else, but to me, I can feel the difference. I feel the difference in my gut. How What's the science behind plant-based diet in terms of reducing inflammation?
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. That's a great question. And it's something that I think is it's so multi-factored that it's hard to capture it all in at once, but there are many ways in which it happens. For one, we know that animal foods and processed foods are inflammatory through their fats, oxidized fats that we're eating, for example, especially when we cook our fats, when we put them through high temperatures. That's creates inflammatory compounds in the body. There also is something called arachidonic acid, which is in chicken and in eggs. And each of the arachidonic acids actually promote poor mental health. The inflammation we know is tied to mental health issues. There's also inflammation that might come from having, for example, the wrong kinds of proteins in our body. So, what's interesting is we can synthesize plant based proteins even better than animal based proteins. Some of those animal based proteins can be carcinogenic, for example. There are just so many different aspects of these foods that are problematic. But on the flip side, the plant foods are anti inflammatory, they're fighting so hard. And so when you're eating, both animal foods and plant foods, you're sort of getting some cancellation effect. But the farther you go toward eating plant foods, the more you're getting the balance toward anti inflammation. So you get antioxidants, you get the phytonutrients in plants, which are meant to protect plants in nature, and they end up also helping to protect us in certain ways. We also have, fiber. Fiber is probably the most important nutrient of plant foods that you cannot find in animal foods, and that's really in low doses in processed foods. But what does fiber do? Fiber is going to pull out excess hormones and toxins from the body. It helps us have really good gut motility, which means we can pass our bowel movements really well. We can also fight cancer with fiber. Part of it is because excess hormones that might be circulating in the body are drawn out from fiber. And just all the many benefits to us from having a fiber rich diet. It seems so symbiotic. And what you were saying before about, follow the design of the body. One of I think, the most exciting things that I learned about early on was that our body is designed to eat plants, even though we're able to process both. We're omnivores. We have a long gut, just like the other ruminant mammals do, which means, and when you have a long gut, it means it takes stuff a long time to get through your intestines. So if you're eating fiber rich foods, they actually go through relatively quickly. And and by virtue of how they ferment, the fermentation itself is a healthy process for us. Fermentation is the sign of the breakdown of the fibers because we're feeding our gut microorganisms. So healthy, happy, biodiverse microorganisms in the gut really allow health to emerge in our bodies. But on the flip side, when you're eating animal foods, you may notice you get more sluggish. You're not
Huh.
passing as much as you wanted to, and it takes more time to get through the system. And the whole key, I think this is actually at the root of all chronic disease. If anything is stuck for any short amount of time or any long amount of time, it's going to build up toward chronic disease. So I even notice for myself now, eating a healthy plant-based diet, that I need to keep eating more raw foods in my diet, the more living foods that are around us, because I can even get clogged a bit from having more too much cooked food in my diet. So the presence of these living raw foods is really quite helpful to get a sluggish digestive system moving. And it's really why, people think that when you eat a plant-based diet, you have to eat salads all the time and you have to have like foods of different colors that you're not so interested in. But you don't have to. You can build a balanced plant-based diet that has, you know, beans and whole grains and vegetables and fruits in a nice balance. But some of us, as you were saying, with this sort of bio-individuality, some of us really need to move toward much more raw foods in order to get to that space of equilibrium with ourselves. So it's all
Or a little more finding a little more, protein in the plant-based foods. Again, based on what you're doing, based on your lifestyle, based on how you're using your body. On days where I'm not very active, I'm very aware, "Hey, I don't need as much fuel." I still need fuel, but I don't need as much. Um, I think that you mentioned something that's so important and kind of off topic, but on topic, and that is paying attention to your bowel movements. Your bowel movements can tell you so much about what's going on in your gut, from the size, the circumference, the diameter, to the color, to the texture, everything. And I think when you're making a change in your diet and you want to pay attention to how you're feeling, as you said, if anything gets stuck, if you have to push, something's missing in your diet for sure. And, it could be water, it can also be that fiber, that you talk about. But the body is designed to take things in, process it, and release it. And whether you're talking about an emotion being stuck, you're talking about food being stuck or a joint being stuck, that's not the natural way of the body. The way of the body is to be fluid and to keep things moving. And that is in alignment with this beautiful earth that you talk about, saving this beautiful environment that we are a part of, that we're nested in. The constant regeneration, the constant tilling of the soil, the nourishment, the watering, all of that. We do it outside, it affects what happens, inside to us. Um, how have how did your dream come to you? I know you said, well, you had personal illness, you had symptoms of endometriosis that you'd had since you were a teenager, and that you lost weight and then you couldn't get rid of weight. And how did the dream or vision come? For me, it didn't come until I took my shoes off and then I started dreaming.
Thank you. Yes. The dream for me of where I am now with Plant Powered Metro New York, it really started when I began to have conversations with people about what I had done to feel better, to look better, to
Mhm.
have the energy that I was starting to have. As people asked me about it, I could see them closing off,
Oh, what closing?
closing because
Whoa, that's not what I would have expected. I was expecting them to get excited, but see, I'm curious.
well, there are folks. I actually have a wonderful network of volunteers and educators who are doing the work with me now at Plant Powered Metro New York. And some people, their visible transformation is just so remarkable that people cannot possibly turn an eye to that. And so, I've got wonderful friends who have come back from a stroke, from morbid obesity,
Yeah.
from really difficult situations that people observed them in. And there was genuine curiosity about what allowed them to make those changes. But for me, because a lot of the change that I felt was internal, it wasn't something that I was sharing with people on a day-to-day basis. Um, people just thought, "Oh, Leanna's got that fad thing going on, and, let her do what she's doing." And so I just find that more often than not, I don't get more follow-up questions, and I really wanna be sharing more, but I'm not a New Yorker by birth, so I don't have that very forward approach to, like, be persistent in getting it out there more aggressively. I am much gentler in how I share, because if for me, I believe in empathy. I believe that I have to connect personally to somebody else in order to have a meaningful conversation with them that will move them. So I wanted to build an environment in which I could start to have those conversations with people who wanted to know this information. And the question was, well, who? Well, obviously, everybody on earth can be positively benefited by dietary change. So, where do you start? But really, I think where you start is with folks who have been struggling with health, who have gotten a
Yeah.
diagnosis that's been really shocking or overwhelming for them to handle, or folks who have been medicated who really don't love the feeling of being medicated or don't love the principle of being medicated.
Mm.
And I think that people need to know, I know that people need to know that they have options, that there is another way of experiencing health, of experiencing healthcare, and that we don't necessarily need to go to the expert physician to find that information. We should be finding that in our communities. We should be finding that within the comfort of our trusted, community leaders and advisors and people who we who we just feel a connection with. So for me, taking what I learned and turning it back and putting it within a community framework was the most natural next step. Mostly because, as you've heard, of course, politically speaking, there's all this talk about people needing to access healthcare, needing to access preventive screenings, needing to access tertiary care. What folks don't talk about is that true prevention happens at home and in your communities. And I think that um, when we can change the narratives within our community spaces, our gathering places, and when we can change what's on the cafeteria spread, or when we can change
Oh, please.
right, what we serve at parties, how we nourish our families, all of these things, they are not in let's call it the ivory tower of healthcare. They're within our reach.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to make an impact there, and so the question of, well, how do you get there? How do you mobilize people? How do you inspire them on the community level is what I'm really trying to chip away at now
Well,
and
you've
find.
done it. So tell
Yeah.
us how you do it. How did you do it and how are you still doing it?
Thank you. Yeah. We have, as I mentioned, an amazing network of people who have already learned about plant-based nutrition in similar ways as I. Like, I was a solo researcher trying to find my way, and I came to meet a lot of others like that through a platform that had been online for a while. It's not there anymore. There are many, many documentaries out there that are worth watching on this topic. And one that I had watched early on was called Plant Pure Nation. And there was a national organization that was um, trying to help grassroots folks to develop community around healthy eating, and I decided to be one of them in Manhattan.
Mm.
And as I started to do my work, I brought in from my background, I brought in the tools of organizational development and appreciative inquiry and positive psychology, as well as practical experience doing community engagement and working in nonprofits and doing fundraising and things that were really quite practical. Um, and then, seeing how they could be applied within these communities. And one of the most powerful things that I learned early on was about partnership, just the very
Yeah.
idea that when we, an individual partner with not just another human being, but with an organization, we can see more exponential change because
Mhm.
I could work person by person by person, trying to help each person nourish themselves. But when you have the platform of an organization that already has a following, a mailing list, a community of trust, that is sort of the most natural place to bring this information. So, beautifully enough, Debbie, our mutual contact, Caroline Collis in Manhattan at the JCC in my neighborhood, was one of those people who could receive and could hear and
Mhm.
was open to the message that I brought. And we began a collaboration to develop programming and experiences through her organization, which was really the very beginning of how we started to pull everything together. But at the same time, I was networking with physicians and I was networking with other grassroots leaders in other parts of the city. And so within 9 to 12 months, I had this vision that we could create a metro wide organization with people from all over the community who were all working together as this force for good and organize programming, organize people, organize, what our core messages would be, and over time build that trust that we wanted to see on the community level with many, many organizations well beyond the JCC and well beyond a single doctor at a single institution. So that's what we're doing. And, it involves a lot of, as I mentioned, it's a lot of people. So for me, I'm interacting with a
How
lot of
many
people
people are we
all the time.
talking here? How many
Um,
people?
Okay, so there's about 180 people who are part of my volunteer network,
Wow.
staff, advisory boards. That's more of like I would call them an inner circle, but it feels like too big to be called an
It's a
inner
big inner
circle.
circle.
Yes. And outside all of these community partners. So we've probably worked with well over 100 different organizations in the past 5 years. And one thing that I'll mention, which I think is really important, is that in the city, in New York City, we have a mayor who dramatically changed his health by eating whole food, plant-based nutrition. That was his way to reverse diabetes. He actually put it fully into remission. He had advancing blindness. He had neuropathy in his fingers that his doctors told him was not ever going to go away.
Right.
And his A1C, his marker of diabetes, was through the roof. And within a matter of weeks, he saw such dramatic changes. He was totally sold. And so he's been a huge advocate from an amazing perch, putting out there this idea that eating
Yeah.
plants is powerful. And so he's been working on policies through his administration and new ways of, feeding kids. There's plant-based meals now available at schools all across New York City. Um, there's mandated plant-based meals through the older adult centers that are serving people, in their older years as they're dealing with multiple chronic diseases. And so while that's going on, I'm trying to build the effort on the ground that will allow him and his efforts to be received positively. Because the
Mhm.
worst thing that could happen is that people say, "Why is the mayor taking away my meat?" And they should know, they should feel, they should be inspired by the evidence, by the practice, by the taste of eating plants so that they can receive from the top down, and we need to be there at the bottom up building that. So I feel very lucky to be in a community where we have this growing infrastructure across many levels that can promote healthy living and healthy eating.
You God, there's so many things I want to hit on. First of all, you're talking about, let's make it clear for our listeners, adult onset diabetes. There's a big difference between childhood diabetes and adult onset diabetes. And, all the research and people to understand that, here's this beautiful, healthy cell and the pancreas puts out insulin to keep everything balanced and healthy. But if the fat builds up around the cell and it can't get in, eventually the pancreas just says, "I'm not working for you anymore, I'm tired," and it just shuts off. But it can shut back on, which is it can turn back on, which is what you're talking about
Yes.
from a plant-based uh, diet. Now, I have recently had a dear friend who was diagnosed with cancer. One of the first things that she did was to research like crazy on plant-based diet was one of the first things that came up. She immediately went to that. She's still on it. She's doing really, really well. They had surgery, no more sign of the cancer, and she's doing lots of things. But really, what she's looking at is what is she putting inside her body, and what can she put inside her body to help her. Of course, when she was going through chemotherapy, etc. When you have a need, then you're gonna get interest, right? So, it's that great relationship model of I've gotta perk somebody's interest by addressing a need they have and maybe even a need they don't know they have. And I find that to be a really important tool in communicating with people about diet. There's a big sensitivity around it, big sensitivity about talking about weight. Um, but we're talking about health here, right? So we're just talking about health, the health of a body, its internal environment, its ability to function at its optimum, regardless of whether you're dealing with a short or a long term illness. Plant based diet can be exceptionally beneficial. It's a whole lot easier to digest, does not take nearly the amount of life force energy. And when your body's in a healing crisis, it needs to be able to draw upon what we put in it and utilize that to optimize the use of our life force energy. Life force energy is that healing force of life force meant to help us sustain our health and well-being. How cool that you got to the the heart that makes the city beat, the mayor.
Mhm.
The influence that somebody in government can have is so important. Just like I'm saying to anyone that's listening, the influence that you can have as a teacher and a teacher, the influence you can have as a community member is more than you can imagine when you have the right education and you can share it with an audience that's interested. And that's really what it's about. Who's interested? Well, anybody that wants to have more energy, anybody that wants to age gracefully, anybody that wants to be able to move better, have healthier joints, have healthier digestion, metabolism, elimination, lower cholesterol, like you said, eliminating adult onset diabetes. The list goes on and on and on. Now, my question always is like Nia, why wouldn't you want to do it? And I think that it comes down to sometimes laziness, human laziness, and oh, what I'm doing is easy. My family, there's always an excuse. I don't have the time. My family won't eat it. And there's nothing more important than self care, healthcare. Nothing. So, how how do you as a change leader yourself guide these volunteers to move through resistance?
Mhm. Thank you. Great question. Um, the first thing about resistance to recognize is that it's coming from a place of fear. And for me, being rooted in a positive psychology framework,
Mhm,
I want to change the emotional tenor of the conversation. Because one of the things, right, when we put up a question or we try to defend our position, we're just activating some of the more primitive aspects of our brains, of our bodies, and you can feel that tension. So when we have our volunteers and our anybody, it's even a physician who may be used to being at a desk talking to people about their health, but then they come into a room and are teaching. Like, there's a whole different flavor of conversation that has to happen. And the most important thing that we learn in conflict mediation is that nobody can refuse something that is about yourself. So the story, the individual story is super powerful at the beginning. We need to be able to tell our stories in ways that people will say, "Huh, that's interesting." And then to open up, to be able to answer questions, because often people will say, "But, I heard that a plant-based diet doesn't have all the nutrients you need. I don't understand how you could possibly get enough protein. Well, I heard that soy was bad for you. Well, but what about this particular condition that I have where I can't digest such and such?" I could throw at you 50 other questions that are barrier questions that people put up, which they may be curious to get an answer for, but it really is a reflexive reaction. And I think that when we can offer up these ideas with love, when we can offer up answers calmly, when we can show up as people who are not wearing a hat of expertise, but a hat of friendship, like that is something that changes the receptiveness in our communities. But the other thing that's really key also with resistance is I think, of course, there's power in numbers. And that's why I started Plant Powered Metro New York. I wanted to be out there not as Lianna, who doesn't have credentials after her name. I wanted to be there as Lianna, who is a part of a movement of people who, if you go to my website, I've got doctors here. And if you look and see all the different partnerships that we have, like there is validation in the partnerships and in the numbers. So we can bring that as a way of creating legitimacy and helping people to think, huh, well, had it just been some random person talking to me about this, I don't know that I'd think twice. But if you have a conversation and then maybe you look at the website and then maybe you drop into a webinar and you learn a little bit more, the onion starts to be to be peeled. And for me, I think it's the idea that we don't need to jump immediately into marriage with people. We can set up this framework of courtship where people can gently get to know a new way of living that may feel very, very different and far from where our starting place is, but over time become more open to. And so, as you know, Debbie, right, some people are ready to move, some people are
Yeah.
ready to be present with you, and others need that time. So, if we can plant the seeds and be patient with those who need that time and be ready to hold hands with the folks who are willing to walk into a new reality, that's really the key. So, with our network, one of the things that we do is we train people to be peer mentors. And mentorship as an idea is not about establishing expertise, but about giving people an opportunity to share their lifestyle and to be a guide and a friend to others. So anybody in our community, we invite them to take advantage of mentorship, which we do. We offer it like on a rolling basis. You can just sign up on our website to get some help and ask people, well, how do you do this? And wait, I need to go shopping, but maybe I need a partner. Do you want to come with me? That's the idea of peer support. Um, and in our mentorship training, the very first module that we go through is on empathy. It's about tapping into our compassion and seeing the world through somebody else's eyes and not jumping into answering a question, but stopping and validating what we're hearing and wondering, could we turn it around? So that's to me one of the most important aspects of stewarding someone else's behavior change. It's to be there and to listen and to help, direct people as they want to be directed, but not to push and not to force, because there's too much of that going on in the world.
Yeah. Right. Set the table and let people come to it in their own natural time. Um, I love the concept of mentorship and bringing somebody with you to the grocery store. And I remembered studying how to, because I love color and as an artist, I'm drawn to color, but reading that, every time you create a meal, you should have all the colors on the plate so that you satiate the eyes. So you have red and yellow and orange and white and brown and green. And I personally have found it to be so true versus if I have a plate and it's brown, green, white. Right? There's something about all of those colors that I find I chew my food more slowly. I eat more slowly. And I somehow feel that I'm getting nourished through my eyes. That's affecting the saliva in my mouth, and that's
Yes.
affecting my digestion. Could be just in my mind, but I perceive it to be true. And, you know, also being aware that sweet, salty, sour, bitter, pungent, feeding the tongue, feeding the taste buds so that after a meal, you're not craving. The belief system is if there's one taste bud that didn't get a little nourishment, it's going to really let you know, gee, I feel like I want something sweet. Gee, I feel like I want something salty. And I have found that to be, true as well. And, um, having a firsthand experience of living with someone that has a chronic illness, pancreatitis, that makes it that taking enzymes to digest food, etc., and watching that healing process, which has been pretty amazing. What was challenging was that there were no resources when it came to, well, how do you eat? What do you eat? And that mentoring is can be so helpful for people, not just when something chronic shows up, but realizing that when you're making a change in a diet, you're talking about breaking habit. That's not easy. You're talking about breaking an addiction because our diet, the way we like our food, it becomes an addiction. And we want to feed that. We want to taste it and say, that's what I want. And if I'm not going to get it, I'm not going to like the meal. So it's breaking the addiction, breaking the cycle. And that takes a few days. It
Yes.
takes a little while. And the other thing that, I found in more of a plant-based diet is really learning how to work with temperature. How to work with temperature. What could you tell us about that to bring out the flavors and get the best benefit from the what's on the outside and what's on the inside of that vegetable?
That's great. Yeah, and maybe I'll go back to color because color and temperature are related.
Mhm.
And color is also one of those aspects of the human body that we have been evolutionary built to, to find plants in our environment through
Mhm.
their colors. So purple and orange and green, all of these colors, we aren't unlike carnivores. We have the full spectrum of colors in our eye.
Mhm.
And that's part of why we need those plants. So when we relate it to temperature, this actually is really important. We can cook our vegetables to death and we will not
Yeah,
derive nutrients from them, right? And when we cook them to death, they lose their color. So the more it looks like, brown mush on your plate, the less we've enabled the plant to do what it needs to do when it enters our body.
mhm,
So I love actually with greens, for example, the harder greens like kale and collard greens, they start out this sort of beautiful green color. And then if you steam them or put them in a hot pot and then quickly blanch them, they become even more vibrantly green
yeah,
and before they start to turn brown.
right,
So that's also a way to activate color through temperature, but just very gently, very, a quick heat. And that is known to sort of give us even more of the anti-inflammatory benefits too. Then, with other aspects of temperature, I just think it's so easy to we sometimes at American we have this grill this grill obsession. When we grill our foods, when we put them on really high heat and we get the char, there are substances that are created that are carcinogenic. We know that from the science. So, I would say don't worry about it too much if you're putting corn on the cob on the grill compared to putting a piece of meat on the grill. Don't overthink it too much. But if you want to take your nutrition to the next level, instead of putting the corn on the cob on the grill, just steam it in a pot with, the fast heat that comes up.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't even have to boil it.
Yeah,
And by the way, steaming is probably one of the most energy efficient ways of cooking your food too, because all you do is get it boiling a little bit and you use a very small amount of water. So I don't know that one of the things if we could go, Debbie, to the idea of the spiritual aspect of eating,
yes.
for me, as I became more personally connected to the lifestyle of eating plants, I found that not only was I feeling better, but I was using less and I was becoming more conscious of
Yeah,
everything around me in a way that made me feel connected to others and to the earth far more than I had before. And I didn't grow up in the city. I've not been part of the urban jungle for all of my life. I grew up going out in my backyard and, sitting in the middle of a forest and reading a book or weeding flowers with my mom. It just like I did have those natural experiences, but I find that even more so now when I live in the environment I live, having this connection to nature through the food that I procure is really quite miraculous. And the idea that when I nourish my body, not only am I doing good for me, I'm doing good for the earth because eating plants, although we know there are challenges in how human labor is deployed to harvest fruits and vegetables. We know that there are those challenges, but those challenges are so different from the vagaries of the animal agriculture system that I feel that I just feel this sense of peace in myself that I am eating foods that did not have to be killed, that I didn't ask anybody to kill anything for me, that there wasn't, the excrement running off into the lagoons at those big animal operations. All of the things that I've come to learn now, choosing a plant-based lifestyle and seeing how destructive the animal agriculture system is, it is nothing short of miraculous to own a lifestyle that can have so many ripple effects on so many levels. And it's good for us, it's good for the animals, it's good for the people in labor, it's good for our ecosystems. And it's also one other piece that I didn't even think about was it's good for um, how we can solve poverty and hunger around the world.
yeah,
Because one thing I came to know was that we redirect calories away from humans so that we can feed the animals that feed us. And that's such an inefficiency that, we have, from what I understand, we have enough calories on Earth to feed 10 billion people. And we have 8 billion people now. But so many of those calories go to the animals that we farm in terrible ways. So, I don't often start conversations talking about these topics because I feel that there is this positive energy and power that comes from talking about how we as human bodies can embrace and become free of disease through eating plants. But it also seems to be the most natural progression of awareness for everyone to connect what we do personally to what happens on this universal level. So I hope that draws some interest from your listeners. And
oh, absolutely. I love how you put that spiritual bow on it. That brings me back to the I, the we, the us kind of thinking that we are in this lived experience together. Everything that we experience, everything happens in a body. This is our home. This is our sacred home. But we share space with every living species on the planet. believe their home is sacred as well, and the earth itself, the home for us human beings and all living beings, as sacred. And that is nested within the cosmos and this universe that we are always exploring and falling in love a little bit more with mystery versus logic, right? Looking up, looking out and around a little bit more, and um, taking the time to sense and feel, less time thinking about what we should be doing, and taking action to make changes. I want to share Liana's exercise with you all. Walk into a grocery store, take a deep breath, and notice what's around you that looks like it came from the earth versus a factory or a slaughterhouse. Recognize the magnitude of the difference between how we eat now and how we have historically eaten. Walk by the vegetables and notice the scent of the air and the colors. It's the first aisle I go to. I go there to fill up my basket for that very reason. I want to touch to activate the sense of connection. I want to smell. I want to look. And I believe I can almost hear them talking to me. Hey, Debbie, take radishes today. I happen to have a great relationship with a plant based diet. Does that mean that I don't eat meat once in a while? Sometimes I do. It's not very much. Um, Please know that this talk is not about coercing you. This talk is meant to inspire you to think for yourself and to look at other options and to consider other choices that may actually leave you feeling better, healthier, stronger, with a sense of vitality, that sense we talk about in Nia, feeling alive. Oftentimes, the fatigue that we're feeling, we're not really tired. What we're sensing is the exhaustion that comes from our body attempting to process something that it's just not good for it. Just like being in a bad relationship can make you feel bad, being in a bad relationship with food can make you feel bad as well. When we focus on foods primarily from plants, fruits, vegetables, and nuts, seeds, oils, whole grains, legumes, and beans, it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, they're a vegetarian. No, or a vegan. Get rid of labels and just say, I choose to eat what makes me feel healthy and well so that I have energy to live the life that I want to live, so that I have energy to do the things that I want to do. Remember that a well balanced plant based diet can give you all the necessary protein, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals that you need to sustain your optimal health. Do not stop taking your medication just because you're on a plant based diet. This is something that you want to connect with your physician about. And keep in mind, this is one of those things when you do your research, just because somebody's a physician does not mean that they understand nutrition. Um, they don't necessarily, and they have not been trained necessarily. There's a lot out there. Do your own research. And Lana, how can people jump into your Jumpstart program? Is there a way people can, even though they're not in New York City, is there a way that people can get involved and find out more about you?
Absolutely. Yes. So if you visit our website, which is plantpoweredmetrony.org, you'll find we have a fair number of activities that we do online Some of them are general webinars or cooking shows, and others that are really big, um, loving Jumpstart program is there to guide people through dietary change because we know that one of the biggest hurdles is just getting from here to there. And once you get over that hump of the tough stuff of transition, it can be smoother sailing. So we offer our Jumpstart program a few times per year, sometimes in Spanish as well. And it's online, it's virtual. So if you are in a time zone that is accessible to the New York time zone, then you should be able to jump in and be a part of it. And we will have one coming up in January 2025. And if you check out our website, you'll see an opportunity to come to others in the coming year.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to hold that vision that this education becomes something global. But even if we can just start to branch out in the United States, I know that I'm excited to share this information. So thank you so much for sharing your dream and also sharing your story. And more important, sharing a philosophy and a belief that has come through personal experience and the desire to research and to discover knowledge that's out there that you didn't know. And now that you have become so excited about the benefits you've received, you're sharing it with everybody else. And that's the best kind of human being on the planet that there is. So I can't wait for people to jumpstart this. Thank you. Thank you. To find out more about me, everybody, you can go to my online magazine, DebbieRosas.com. There you can browse, read, and you can sign up to receive 2 body and life inspirational articles that I share every single week. You can find me on Facebook by searching Nia, on Twitter or Instagram at Nia Technique, and on nianow.com. You can find Nia teachers there, more information about a training. And I invite you to go and experience 2 weeks free of Nia. Nia on demand. Sign up for 2 weeks free. And also, there's a 12 video series there that you can watch in your own time, in your own way. It's about getting started with Nia, creating a movement lifestyle, just like you want to create a plant-based diet. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Don't forget, this is our time to get into the conversation and to get into our body, to get into our life, living it in a different way, more meaningful, with greater purpose. I'll see you next time.